So thank you, everybody. Welcome to our third episode in the Cyber Red Zone series, where defenders share their security validation winning plays. We're thrilled to have you with us as we explore another customer's journey with Pentera. If you're joining us for the first time in this series, I'd like you to know that last week my good friend Stephen Tutterow connected with Al Restivo from Magnetar. And earlier this week, I had the privilege of interviewing Michael Francis from Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. Each of these share unique perspectives with Pentera. If you're watching the series in reverse, I would encourage you to go back and check out the previous episodes. I'm your host, Thomas Poor. I'm Director of Product Marketing with Pentera. And joining us today is Paul Wirszyla from Sycuan Casino Resort.
Hello.
All right.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks, Paul. So what I'll do is I'll let out a little bit of a teaser into some of the topics that we'll talk about today. I'm really excited for this session because the word ransomware and the word casino are words that are still being thrown around boardroom tables. And it's interesting to have Paul here and to catch a little bit of his perspective. So as we go through, it'd be great to sort of hear what his world has looked like since since some recent attacks. All right, so Paul, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate you taking the time, spending half an hour or so with us. Before we dive too deep into your Pentera experience, for the people out there, why don't you maybe share, like, tell us who is Paul Wirszyla? Why would I listen to him as it relates to security validation and Pentera?
Gotcha. Well, my name is Paul Wirszyla. A little bit about my background. I've had an interesting career arc. I would say I started in McDonald's drive-through early in my IT career, studying port numbers while I was washing trays. From there, I became a PC tech for Staples for about 6 months, went back to McDonald's and went to the esteemed Hamburger University to become an operations technology person level 3. Wasn't professional. They just called us a person, which I found hilarious. But I ended up doing tech work for a franchise of 18 stores here in Southern California, working on POS systems and still going to school for my degree in cybersecurity at the esteemed ITT Tech, which was a whole nother story, as people may know. After that, I ended up in tribal gaming on the gaming commission side with the surveillance department of the Barona Band of Mission Indians, where I spent 6 years, finished my master's degree there in cybersecurity engineering and got my CISSP while I was there. And then I ended up at Sycuan in my first officially titled cybersecurity role as the cybersecurity analyst. And I'm here now.
Yeah, that's quite the journey.
Yes.
For sure. But having spent some time with you, I know that you have a very rich background in securing environments. You wanted to share a little bit about the environment that you work in?
Yes, currently we're in around 2,000 to 2,500 employees. A ton of slot machines, probably upwards to 2,000 to 3,000 of those. Big old network. We actually support the infrastructure for our tribal side and our gaming commission side as well. So it's a lot. Yeah. And we have our Singing Hills Resort as well. If anybody's ever golfed there, it's a nice place.
Oh, very cool. Now, maybe, can you talk a little bit about, like, before we dive too deep into the Pentera aspects, right? I think what a lot of people are really curious about is, how has, news headlines like MGM sort of maybe affected your day-to-day a little bit?
So it's actually been very beneficial, even though it was a terrible thing that happened to MGM and Caesars. 17 properties were down across the board once they were hit with that attack. They were down for days, but that kind of helped us, get an actual ransomware tabletop scheduled with upper management, because now this is in the news. It's big. Caesars paid out $15 million to erase customer data. MGM decided to rebuild, but still, we don't want to be in that situation. Sycuan itself was hit in 2019 with their own ransomware attack, and I was kind of surprised that that didn't result into yearly tabletops. So kind of glad this one happened because we're going towards that direction now.
Yeah, I think a lot's changed since 2019, just as far as like visibility, the headlines, the
Yep.
impact. Yeah, so I think what's really interesting about the MGM too is also multi-factor authentication was used, right? So it was social
Yes.
engineering
It
combined
was
with
pretty
stolen
bad.
credentials, right? And really understanding the blast radius. And as I think we walk through some of this, we'll hear about your journey and maybe how you're using Pentera to combat this and assist with your tabletop exercise. But let's use
Um,
this opportunity to sort of transition into the program and the journey. So starting with your first experience with Pentera. So from what I understand, you joined Squan and Pentera was already there.
yes.
What do you see like the day to day look like? When you first started versus I guess what I want to call like the Paul and Pentera combo, and how has that sort of progressed over your tenure there?
So I've been here for about a year and 3 months now, and pretty much when I first started, I was thrown into the deep end with out any floaties, I like to call it. I had the security engineer for about a month before he moved on, so it was pretty much just cram every tool we used in this organization in that month span. Obviously, that's not always a good thing. It's have nobody to fall back on and ask, how did I do this again in a month? So it was kind of a nice 4 weeks of just grinding and learning stuff. But I remember doing Pentera first. We did like a little ransomware emulation. He was just showing me around the tool, and it was performed on my desktop. And from there, I just kind of pivoted and started searching through it, seeing what I could do and what I couldn't do. It was also nice because we had the monthly get-togethers with our sales rep at the time. I'm not sure if that is what it's called, Tom, but it's
Yeah,
Gina
the
now.
SBA. Yeah.
Yes, which
Yeah.
was nice because he was able to show us more, or me more. If I had a question or anything, I was just able to go, hey, what if I do this? What does this mean? That kind of thing pertaining to the different tools. Yeah, so it was really helpful to have that aid, I should say, because I would have maybe taken a little longer learning it, but pretty
Yeah, so
simple
I
tool.
think, right. I mean, you're definitely thrown into the deep end. Sometimes refer, you're drinking from the fire hydrant or the fire hose itself, right? So there's a lot
Yes.
going on. Um, I think maybe, you mentioned, ransomware emulation. Maybe talk a little bit about, your Pentera deployment and what that looks like inside your environment. So I know that you're using ransomware, but like, what are some of the other capabilities that you're using day to day?
So currently, when I first started, it was just those random tests, like just seeing what they did. But I got it to a point now where you can set it up to have it automated monthly, certain activities. So normally I'll start with a black box test, which is you know nothing about what's going on in here pretty much, and see what I can get, or see what Pentera can get. And most times, it'll catch like one of our text credentials because they log into a lot of places, and it's very good at those man in the middle attacks. But then I'll take that and then rerun the test with a gray box, which is kind of a what if. Well, I have these credentials now. What can this person do if they were to be able to do it? And I would compare those two tests. And most times the what if gray box yielded more results because you actually have credentials.
Yeah,
So
so I think that's really interesting, right? So, you're using Pentera Core, and that particular module is assumed breach, right? At some point,
yes,
there's going to be something that comes in, and it's really understanding your attack surface from the inside out.
yes,
And when we think about maybe what happened with MGM, right? So like obviously this will come with a disclaimer because what really happened is behind closed doors. But from what the attackers said, or what we perceive the attackers said, is they were sitting on Okta servers, Okta agents, listening and trying to crack additional passwords, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And passwords are where it's at. They didn't hack in, they logged in. That's the big thing. It wasn't a hack. It was they picked up the phone, impersonated somebody on LinkedIn, got a super admin password, and ran with it. So
Yeah.
it's always
So yeah, you
interesting.
mentioned black box, which is like, we know nothing about the environment. We just sort of go in, and then that's a gray box. That's sort of what I would equate to is really truly understanding the blast radius associated with any user account, right? Can I
Yes.
get to specific achievements with a set of credentials through the active progression of exploit, right?
And I always like that it's called an achievement in Pentera because it's like, yes, I did this. And you're like, well, good for you. And now I got to figure out how to patch that.
Yeah, I mean that's totally the adversary perspective, right? When they think about,
Yes,
being inside your environment, they would see that as an achievement, towards their success, right?
for
So,
sure.
yeah. All right, cool. Let's see. And so as you get in, right? So you maybe not drinking from the fire hose as much.
Mhm.
You start using the product day to day. Maybe talk a little bit about how, like, were you using this in a way to validate the investments that you've made into preventative tools like EDR or something like that?
Yeah, so the greatest thing I noticed about it is when I was running those black box or what if tests on certain departments that I would get some hits back that um, Pentera failed to do something on a certain PC, but then it was able to do it on another. And the exact error was the AV did not block it. And I was like, well, why didn't it block it? Everything should be up to date. Turns out logging into that EDR or XDR in our case was not up to date. And it was on an old version that doesn't even show up in our cloud list. So I would not have known that was an issue unless I had run the test, which is great for me because I was able to catch it and patch that real quick by uninstalling, manually reinstalling. But started to hit other departments, and we are still finding outdated XDR agents like in random places, and it's Pentera has been helpful with that.
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations have an assumption about their security. I think that one of the benefits that Pentera brings is, it reduces the uncertainty about that environment or about that assumption, right? And so having more certainty about the security of your environment really gives you, a better defensive position. Uh,
Yes, you can
Now,
never be too secure. No.
right. So, one of the things and that I would do now is I would sort of dig into, your first experience of Pentera. It's traditionally done through like a 1 day POV
Yep.
where we send our team out on site. They come in, with a laptop, and they sit down in a room with like a war room, and they go after assets, right? So you didn't have the opportunity to experience that 1 day POV. uh, you know, they're absolutely amazing. Instead, you sort of get to walk in and get immediate access to this.
Yes.
So like one of the things I'm curious about, like, was there like one or two maybe wow moments that you had when you're first running this? Like you probably weren't sure what to expect. I'm just kind of curious if you had like a wow moment.
The major wow moment was the ease of use. I would say it's really relatively easy to use. Anybody could use it if they're you just look at it and if they're non-technical, you can kind of tell them what the menus mean and stuff. You are technical, it's going to be easy to walk into and just say, yes, I would like to do this. I would like this warning sent to me if it happens. And then reading the results is really easy too, because I don't know about anybody else here, but I use Greenbone Security Assistant for some stuff. That's a free piece of software. And it doesn't really give the results in a nice, pretty format. And Pentera's is very nice to read. You can actually print out the executive form and give it to your boss, and he'll be like, okay, I get what you're saying here. But you can also get the more detailed form that you can send over to the server engineers and be like, hey, we need patches on these. This is why. And it tells you what it did. The attack maps are very cool. It's like if it compromised something, it will tell you how it did it. What was the chain of events in a nice, easy to read chart. And I really, that would be a wow moment for me, I guess, because I was like, oh, cool. Like you got this username, you were able to do this. And then the other wow thing about it is that if you were to, there's an option to like fix the vulnerability. And when you hit fix, it tells you how much of the tree it takes out. So like if this username wasn't compromised, it wouldn't be able to do this, but that's just a simple scenario there.
Yeah, and that's there to guide remediation priority in a lot of ways, right? So when you talk about like
Yes.
Greenbone, so that's equivalent to traditional vulnerability management.
Yes.
And it's providing priority based off of severity scores. What's interesting, it's not like exploitability, right? And
Hmm.
I think that's one of the main differences where we are progressing an attack in a safe by design manner to show real impact based on your exploitability. Like and one of my guys likes to call it exploitative management instead of vulnerability management, right?
Yeah, it's
Uh,
easier to take a this did happen to your boss than the this was what could happen.
right.
Yeah. So
No. Now, let's see. So a couple of moments, and I think the other thing that maybe gets lost is, like if you think about traditional pen testing, you've got somebody that's coming in, they're going to, focus on a specific segment of your environment, right? So it's just a percentage, maybe 1%, 2% of the environment. Yeah, I think the other thing, it maybe is just time on target, right? So you had mentioned it earlier where you come in and you set up these automated runs of Pentera to go out and generate all these findings and understand attack paths, right? So, like, is there a time saving benefit associated to, being able to run essentially 24/7?
definitely, because I am a one-person show and I have to do all the policies and blue team activities. It is nice to have a I'm pointing to my laptop over here because that's where it is, but a something to help me with the actual exploit part because you can spend a lot of time in a Kali box yourself, but you'll be in there for hours doing stuff. And it's the box itself, the Pentera box, just makes everything more streamlined. And I can, like I said, I do set up monthlies because you always have to be testing. Um, which was another feature I really liked was the grading system now that we have on reports. You
Oh
can
yeah.
compare the reports up to 8 times, and it's like, well, we were an A this month on the HR department, but this month resulted in a C. What happened? Something Pentera updated with something new. It'll you always have to keep testing, and that's the thing. You always have to keep testing.
Yeah,
I
it's
can't
that
do that.
continuous nature, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's the combination of evolving threat, also evolving networks, right? No network is the same, week to week to week, right? And I think on
Yes.
average, a network changes every 2 weeks.
Uh-huh.
So yeah. Now let's see. So let's dive in a little bit to like some of the memorable experiences or insights that you've had over the last, year plus, right? I think, you had alluded to like the ransomware emulation, and emulation not being a simulation, right? So simulation being, essentially an artificial check, but
Yes.
where we're emulating. And how have you used that?
So I the way I mainly use it is to see if anybody's paying attention. So when you do perform that emulation, your PC really gets bogged down, and it's just kind of curious to see if anybody reports it. Um, Especially, I like to do it to HR a lot, and they never report it. And it's like we have to follow up and be like, "Well, why didn't you say anything? You have all these endpoint detection response alarms. You were working on the PC. You noticed slowdown and nothing." It's interesting stuff. IT is a little better about that though.
Yeah. Now, do you use it in a capacity to test like SLAs from?
Oh, yes. We recently did a POV with some NDR solutions, and I used it a lot for that due to the fact that they said they would call within the hour or so, right? We wanted to test that. We wanted to test the call tree. So if I missed the call, were they going to call the second person? The easiest way for me to do that was to exploit my machine over and over for 7 days straight, especially during the night as well, to make sure they were calling during the night.
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations, they spend a tremendous amount of money on prevention. They have this assumption or a level of uncertainty or what they perceive as certainty into the protective services and SLAs, and I think that, the way that you operate this and, validate the effectiveness of your MDR, I think it's something that, a lot of our customers do, and they see tremendous value in that.
Definitely agree.
Yes.
They did make those SLAs when we did call, by the way, or did do this. So
Yeah. All right. So you had touched a little bit on like remediation, priority, and reporting. So like, let's talk a little bit when it comes to like prioritizing. You talk about like Greenbone a little bit. Like, help me understand the process and any improvement Pentera has helped you with.
So I know I usually do the vulnerability scan first, just because I have that list, and then I say, okay, well, it has its tens, but let's see what actually happens. And so I'll use Pentera to try to exploit whatever those vulnerabilities are, and then prioritize them off of that, lead it over to the server engineers to be like, hey, here you go. This is probably the order we should do this in, and most of the time they're servers. Being in a casino, we have legacy stuff, and that's just the nature of the business. But another thing is it kind of helps us with making sure our GPOs work. I do a lot of Active Directory password attacks, and it's been weird this year because we've been finding that like our password policy isn't blanketed across the entire organization. So you'll have, an Active Directory had complex passwords, right? So you have to have at least one upper, one lower, one number, one special character, at least. And some of the results are yielding like it is just a word that is in a dictionary. And it's like, well, how is that happening? We go in and find that it's a GPO setting. That is not correct. And that's very helpful.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so that's you're taking advantage of the Active Directory password assessment capability, right?
Mm-hmm. Which I
And
do monthly.
you do monthly. And from what I understand, that type of program didn't even exist before, right?
No, I was curious. Another reason I was curious why that didn't actually exist when I got here is like, why are we testing passwords? Because I talk about every weekend orientation, I do new hire orientation, like this is our password policy. But when I'm looking at the results, I'm like, well, this doesn't fit our policy. How is that possible? So I'm telling them this, they're somehow getting around it. Um, so tell them not to
Yeah.
use words, and then they use dictionary words, and it's like, ah, come on.
Yeah, so when you sort of think back to, the first experience of the first touches of Pentera, right? Do you see like your ability to build and execute a password policy program from the ground up as sort of a bonus, right? You probably didn't see that in the first.
Yes,
Yeah,
it was a bonus because it helped me out. Like that's my job, and I wouldn't have probably would have taken me longer to figure out that all the passwords weren't in policy if I didn't have this. So
right. Yeah, and as we know, passwords, it's what everybody chases down. So,
mhm.
I guess like drawing from your ADPA story, I think it's really interesting. How do you quantify any sort of ROI, on working with Pentera? Like, do you have any measurable data that you share,
Uh,
to management?
I do share the reports with them, especially the password ones, and they kind of take it up to the executive team and be like, "Hey, we had 589 passwords cracked. This isn't good. We're a 2,500 person organization. That's a
Yeah,
big chunk." Um, and it's up to them at that point. Like we have the policy in place. We put the GPO in. I put out a weekly newsletter saying, all the cybersecurity stuff. But you know, yeah, we use the reports to run it up the chain and say, hey, this is what we need. This is why we need it. And Terra was able to break it. This would happen in a real scenario. Um,
absolutely.
so
Yep. And the thing is, right, so getting 589 passwords, right, that attacker is simply going to, try and use those in a real adversary engagement, right?
yeah, and I have to say, so the one before that was in January. It was about 300, but then Kevin Cross, I don't know if you know Kevin, but
Oh yeah,
he's
Kevin.
like,
Yeah.
yes, we just added a new module to it. can you run it again? And I updated it, and then we had 289 more passwords. I was like, fantastic, great.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so we are fast approaching our time. I think for the audience out there, right, what are some advice or tips you would offer for anyone that's considering Pentera or automated security validation?
You know, if you're a low man team, honestly, like it's fantastic. It's a great tool to use. Like I said, I automate everything with it. On the attack side, I run these every month. I don't need to remember to run them. It'll send you an email once the test starts. Say, hey, I'm running now. Cool, that's right. I set you to run on the 8th. But the continuous testing is very important. And as a human, we do need sleep. You don't have an MDR service or external penetration testing or any penetration testing company, like do it yourself. Get the box Pentera box, and you can do it yourself. It's very easy to read, easy to implement.
Yeah. And I agree. And it sounds like you've had a really great experience with the team. I think I'd be curious, why do you see as partnering with Pentera the right decision for you and your team?
So far, like not just because of the product, but the customer service aspect. Like I've always had questions; they were always answered within like a day or so. And I'm like, wow, okay, I'm not used to that with some vendors, but Pentera was always there. And I went to see your booth at Black Hat and met with a gentleman named Cooper and talked with him a little bit. And just everybody was nice. They even gave me a copy of your children's book. So the environment's very nice, it seems like in Pentera.
Oh yeah,
Yes, pitched your
Castle
children's book.
Defenders.
Yes.
Castle Defenders. Here's a little
It,
plug. Yes. So
if
Oh,
if you are a cybersecurity professional that has children and they don't understand what you do for a living, this is the book for you. Um,
absolutely.
I don't have children, but I read it in line when I was waiting at Subway at Black Hat because that line was forever, and I was like, "Wow, this is a really good book." So
Yeah.
I gave it to a friend who does have children.
Yeah, very cool. All right, so let's see. We're right where we need to be from a time perspective, which is fantastic. So what I'm going to do now, we'll sort of wrap this up, and we'll take some Q&A from the audience, and then we'll get into what everybody wants. That's probably an NFL jersey, if I had to guess, right? Supporting the Red Zone series. So hang on just 1 second. We'll share. All right. So Q&A time. All right. For all you listeners out there, send your questions over. Okay. We have a couple coming in. I'm just checking chat QA. Here we go. Okay, so first one, Paul. All right, could you share more about the specific challenges or requirements that led you to consider automation, and how has it improved your processes?
So the challenges are like I'm only here for a limited time, honestly, and I'm one person show, like I said, for this entire organization. I spend a lot of time writing policies and doing blue team efforts more than I can focus on the red team aspect. So, like I said, the Pentera box, I know that I came up with a schedule, what departments I want to hit on what days, because you don't want to do everything on the same day, just because it'll be a big report, but you're also affecting these PCs when you're scanning them. And it's just easier for me to schedule out and have these reports monthly on these certain days that I can just compare and easily say, hey, we have some new stuff on this one, that kind of thing. So it just helps me because automation is king.
Yeah, you see it as almost like a force multiplier, right? You get multiple polls available to you.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. So I have a question. Does any threat intel come with a Pentera subscription? So that I can take this one. So we have a credential exposure module as well, and so as part of that, you do get a subscription of essentially monitoring your darknet credentials that are exposed. So as threat actors are, attacking your environment, if credentials from your environment show up on the dark web, we do in fact, capture those, and then we share them. And you can take them and run them through your environment to identify whether or not they were valid, and then really follow through with that gray box, understand the blast radius associated to that compromised account. That was a great question. Let's see, I've got one more here. No, let's see, you may have already touched on it, but like, how do you measure the effectiveness of Pentera supporting your organization's cybersecurity goals and initiatives?
So the grading system's really nice on there, but really you need it. We can only do so much with vulnerability scans. We have to prove that it can be exploited. Most times, if we're to get any budget for cybersecurity type deal, MGM has helped. But having a tool that can do it itself and be like, yes, we were able to exploit this, really helps us out with the prioritization of what we need to patch. Finding PCs that have that outdated endpoint detection that we wouldn't have found because the cloud no longer shows it for some reason or another. And just overall, a fantastic thing to have, especially when you're alone again.
Yeah, and I think something that you mentioned earlier, I think really ties in to the ability to measure the effectiveness is leveraging Pentera's ransomware emulation capability for your new tabletop exercises, which I'm sure will be probably set up in a regular
Yes.
cadence. Yeah.
Yes, which will be an interesting show, I'm sure. Which check back in February, we'll have more information on that.
All right. Cool. All right. Let's see. Those are the 3 questions I've seen come in. I don't see any others. Let me check. See if it came in. Nope, I think that's it. All right, so what we'll do is we will try to wrap it up. And let's see. So we do have a winner. Let's get into the win official NFL jersey. So the winner is Douglas. I'm gonna hopefully I pronounce this right. Luddens. Douglas Luddens. So you have won, and I will have a member of my team reach out and thank you very much for sticking around. Let's see. And then what we'll do is we'll just we'll close out. So I really want to thank the audience for some great questions, and I want to Paul, a huge thank you for sharing some of your experiences to our audience. And I didn't know if you had like any final words that you wanted to share with these guys.
Yeah. So as cybersecurity professionals, it is our job to ensure that we do everything in our power to have good training, make sure our defenses are up to date, that kind of thing. Because the reality of the situation is that it's not about preventing a cyber incident from happening entirely. It will happen someday to your organization. Um, the thing we need to do as those professionals that are protecting the network is to extend the duration of how long that'll be till it happens, and mitigate the impact as well as we can when it does happen. And a tool like Pentera that kind of does the attacking for you really does help out. Uh, Patch up your defenses as much as you can as yourself. And another thing is, I know the field can be a little overwhelming with that kind of knowledge and what we kind of go through every day. But I remember one of my colleagues told me one time, the security engineer the month, he's like, "You can't save the world in one day. Just keep going, and you'll be fine." So
No, that's
that's all I
great.
got. Yes.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, and to the audience, thank you for joining and staying tuned. I'm Thomas Poor, and it's been a pleasure holding this session of our Cyber Red Zone series, where defenders share their security validation winning plays. Have a great day, everybody.